Commander Zaelvorn had witnessed the birth of stars. He had walked through the burning cores of dying planets and emerged without a single mark on his crystalline skin. His species, the Eternals, had existed for over 12 billion years, watching galaxies form and crumble like sandcastles beneath cosmic tides. They had seen empires rise across 1,000 worlds, and they had watched those same empires fade into forgotten dust. Nothing in the universe surprised them anymore. Nothing frightened them. At least, that was what Zaelvorn believed until the day he received orders to join a mixed battalion that included human soldiers. The war against the Hollow Ones had been raging for 3 centuries. These creatures came from the spaces between dimensions, beings of pure hunger that devoured everything they touched. They consumed matter, energy, and even time itself. The Galactic Council had assembled the greatest warriors from every known species to fight this threat. The Eternals sent their commanders. The Crothians sent their berserkers. The Mindweavers sent their psychic assassins. And Earth, that small blue planet that had only discovered interstellar travel 50 years ago, sent their soldiers. Zaelvorn remembered the first briefing clearly. He stood in the war room aboard the command vessel, his towering form casting long shadows across the holographic displays. Around him gathered representatives from 30 different species. The Crothians, massive creatures with 6 arms and armored hide that could deflect plasma fire. The Mindweavers, floating entities that existed partially in another dimension, their thoughts capable of crushing enemy minds. The Stellari, beings of pure energy who could survive in the vacuum of space. And then there were the humans. They looked so small, so fragile. Zaelvorn studied the human contingent with something close to confusion. Their bodies were made of soft tissue and weak bones. They could not survive extreme temperatures. They needed constant supplies of oxygen, water, and organic nutrients. A single Crothian could tear one apart with minimal effort. A Mindweaver could destroy their simple brains with a casual thought. Even the gravity of certain planets could crush them. Yet here they stood, assigned to the same front lines as ancient warriors who had been fighting wars since before humanity's ancestors crawled from the primordial oceans. General Marcus Chen led the human forces. He was a man of average height, with graying hair and eyes that held a strange intensity Zaelvorn could not quite understand. When the Galactic Council introduced him, he did not bow or show the elaborate respect protocols that other species displayed. He simply nodded and asked when they would begin fighting. The first mission took them to a world called Nexar Prime. The Hollow Ones had established a stronghold there, a massive structure that pulsed with stolen energy from the star itself. The plan was straightforward. The assault teams would breach the outer defenses while the Eternals provided support with their reality-bending abilities. The Crothians would form the vanguard, their impenetrable bodies absorbing the brunt of the enemy attacks. The humans were assigned to support roles, securing supply lines, and providing covering fire. Zaelvorn did not expect much from them. He had reviewed their combat statistics and found nothing remarkable. Their weapons were crude compared to the plasma cannons of the Stellari. Their armor was laughable next to the natural protection of the Crothians. They could not fly, teleport, or manipulate matter at a molecular level. They were, by every measurable standard, the weakest species on the battlefield. The assault began at dawn. Zaelvorn led his squad through the shattered landscape, his crystal body deflecting the energy blasts that the Hollow Ones sent screaming through the air. Around him, warriors from a dozen species fought and died. The Hollow Ones were endless, pouring from their fortress like water from a broken dam. Each one was a nightmare of shifting darkness and hungry mouths, existing in defiance of natural law. For the first hour, everything proceeded according to plan. The Crothians smashed through the outer walls with brutal efficiency. The Mindweavers created zones of psychic silence that confused and disoriented the enemy. Zaelvorn himself tore through dozens of Hollow Ones, his ancient powers bending reality around him like a protective shell. Victory seemed certain, then the trap was sprung. The ground beneath them collapsed, revealing a secondary layer of Hollow Ones that had been waiting in ambush. Suddenly, the assault force found itself surrounded. The carefully planned formation shattered as warriors scrambled to respond to attacks from all directions. Zaelvorn watched in horror as 3 Crothian berserkers were pulled down and consumed by a wave of darkness. A mindweaver's scream echoed through the psychic plane as its consciousness was devoured. In the chaos, Zaelvorn became separated from his squad. He found himself in a narrow canyon, cut off from reinforcements and surrounded by at least 50 Hollow Ones. His powers were depleted from hours of continuous fighting. His crystal form, which had withstood cosmic forces, was beginning to show cracks. For the first time in his 12 billion years of existence, he felt something he barely recognized: fear. The Hollow Ones closed in, their formless bodies oozing closer with patient hunger. They knew they had him. They could taste his ancient energy, and they wanted it. Zaelvorn prepared himself for his end, wondering which of his memories would last longest as the creatures devoured his consciousness. He thought about the first star he had ever watched being born. All those billions of years ago, it seemed fitting that his existence would end just as that star had, consumed by darkness. The first gunshot cracked through the air like thunder. Zaelvorn turned to see a single human soldier standing at the canyon entrance. She was young by human standards, perhaps 30 of their brief years. Her armor was scorched and damaged. Blood ran from a wound on her forehead. In her hands, she held a weapon that looked almost primitive, a simple projectile device that launched metal at high speeds. She was alone, one fragile human against 50 Hollow Ones that had nearly killed an Eternal. The soldier did not hesitate. She did not run. She opened fire. The first 3 Hollow Ones dissolved as her bullets tore through them. These were not ordinary projectiles, Zaelvorn realized. The humans had developed ammunition specifically designed to disrupt the molecular structure of the Hollow Ones. Simple metal, enhanced with a clever combination of elements that the most advanced species had never thought to try. The Hollow Ones turned toward this new threat, and the human did something that made Zaelvorn question everything he thought he knew about weakness. She charged. Not away from danger, but directly into it. She ran straight toward the mass of darkness, firing as she moved, her body twisting to avoid attacks that should have been impossible to dodge. More humans appeared behind her. A squad of 10 soldiers poured into the canyon, weapons blazing. They moved with a coordination that Zaelvorn had never seen before. Each soldier seemed to know exactly where the others would be, covering angles and creating interlocking fields of fire that turned the canyon into a death trap for the Hollow Ones. Sergeant Kelly Martinez, the soldier who had fired first, reached Zaelvorn's position and dropped into cover beside him. Her breathing was heavy, her body clearly exhausted, but her eyes remained sharp and focused. She looked at him, this ancient being of immense power, and spoke 3 words that would echo in his memory for the rest of his existence. "We've got you." The battle that followed lasted 20 minutes. 20 minutes during which 10 humans held back a force that had nearly destroyed an Eternal commander. They fought without powers, without natural armor, without the advantages that every other species brought to the battlefield. They fought with nothing but their weapons, their training, and something else that Zaelvorn could not quite name. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found the canyon floor covered in the dissolving remains of Hollow Ones. The human squad had lost 2 of their members. 2 had given their lives so that their comrades and an alien they had never met could survive. The survivors did not celebrate. They did not rest. They immediately began tending to their wounded and preparing for the next engagement. Zaelvorn approached Sergeant Martinez after the battle. His crystal form had begun to heal, but the cracks remained visible. A reminder of how close he had come to oblivion. "Why did you come for me?" he asked. "Your orders were to secure the supply lines. You abandoned your position to save one soldier you did not know." Martinez looked at him with those strange human eyes. "You were fighting on our side. That makes you one of us. We don't leave our people behind." "Your people?" Zaelvorn was confused. "I am not human." "Doesn't matter," Martinez replied. "You were in trouble. We could help. So we helped. That's what we do." Zaelvorn spent the following weeks observing the human forces. He watched them train, fight, and recover. He saw things that defied his understanding of how the universe worked. He saw a human medic carry a wounded Crothian 3 times her size across 2 kilometers of hostile territory, because she refused to leave him behind. He saw human engineers work for 70 hours without sleep to repair a damaged supply ship, keeping themselves awake with nothing but chemical stimulants and sheer determination. He saw humans mourn their dead with rituals that seemed primitive but held a weight that he found unexpectedly moving. They gathered around the fallen, spoke words about their lives, and made promises to remember them. Then they returned to battle, carrying those memories like weapons against the darkness. General Chen invited Zyle Vorn to observe a human training session. He expected to see drills and exercises similar to what other species performed. Instead, he watched humans intentionally subject themselves to pain, exhaustion, and psychological stress. They called it building resilience. They were deliberately making their already difficult existence even harder, so that actual combat would feel easier by comparison. "Your bodies are fragile," Zailvorn said to Chen after the session. "Your lifespans are brief. Why do you choose to make things harder for yourselves?" Chen smiled in that way humans did when they found something amusing. "Because we know we're fragile. We know we're brief. So we work twice as hard to make sure we can stand beside warriors like you when the fighting starts." That conversation planted something in Zyle Vorn's mind. A seed of understanding that would grow into something far larger as the war continued. These creatures, so small and so temporary, were not on this battlefield despite their weaknesses. They were here because of them. They knew what they were. They knew what they were facing. And they came anyway. The war continued, and Zyle Vorn found himself requesting assignment to human-led operations. The Galactic Council questioned this decision. Why would an eternal commander, one of the most powerful beings in the known universe, want to fight beside the weakest species in the Alliance? Zyle Vorn could not explain his reasoning in words they would understand. He simply knew that something about the humans made him want to be better, made him want to fight harder. He began to notice things about himself that had not existed before. When a battle seemed impossible, he no longer calculated odds and considered retreat. He looked at the humans beside him and found himself unable to withdraw while they still stood fighting. When his powers were depleted and his ancient body was damaged, he pushed forward anyway, refusing to show weakness in front of soldiers who had none of his advantages but showed none of his hesitation. The war's second year brought a mission that would change everything. Intelligence indicated that the Hollow Ones were constructing a device capable of tearing holes in reality itself. If completed, it would allow them to attack any point in the galaxy simultaneously. The device was located on a moon orbiting a gas giant, protected by the largest concentration of Hollow Ones ever recorded. The assault fleet gathered at a staging area 3 star systems away. Commanders from every species debated strategy for weeks. The Eternals proposed a sustained bombardment that would last years. The Crothians wanted a direct assault with everything they had. The Mindweavers suggested psychic attacks that might take decades to organize. General Chen proposed something different, something insane. He wanted to send a small team directly into the moon's core, plant explosives designed to destabilize its orbit, and escape before the moon crashed into the gas giant below. The resulting explosion would destroy the device and everything on the moon. It was a suicide mission. The chances of the infiltration team surviving were calculated at less than 2%. Volunteers were requested. No species was willing to send their warriors on such a mission, except the humans. The mission briefing room fell silent when Sergeant Martinez raised her hand. Behind her, the entire human contingent rose to their feet. 63 soldiers, all of them volunteers for a mission that promised almost certain death. They stood without hesitation, without visible fear, as if they were volunteering for a routine patrol, rather than a one-way journey into the heart of enemy territory. Zyle Vorn watched this display with a feeling he could not name. 12 billion years of existence had not prepared him for the sight of beings who lived such short lives, willingly offering to cut those lives even shorter. He had seen bravery before. He had witnessed courage across countless battlefields. This was something different. This was something that made his ancient heart pound with an emotion he barely recognized. He raised his own hand. The room turned to stare at him. An Eternal, one of the most powerful beings in the known galaxy, volunteering for a mission designed for expendable soldiers? The Crothian commanders rumbled with confusion. The Mindweavers sent ripples of disbelief through the psychic spectrum. General Chen simply looked at Zale Vorn and nodded, as if he had expected this all along. "Commander," the Galactic Council's representative spoke with barely contained shock. "Surely there are better uses for your abilities. An Eternal should not throw their existence away on a human suicide mission." Zale Vorn looked at Martinez and her soldiers. They had not asked for his help. They had not expected it. Yet something in their eyes changed when he volunteered. Something like respect, something like welcome. "If these humans are willing to die for victory," Zale Vorn said, "then I am willing to die beside them." The mission team was assembled within 12 hours. 63 humans and 1 Eternal, loaded onto a stealth vessel, designed by human engineers. The ship was a crude thing by galactic standards, lacking the elegant curves of Eternal craft or the brutal efficiency of Crothian war vessels. It was angular, practical, and ugly. The humans called it the Hope's Edge. Martinez commanded the ground team. Chen would coordinate from the command vessel, providing what support he could from outside the moon's interference field. The plan was simple in its outline but impossibly complex in execution. They would enter through a thermal vent on the moon's dark side, navigate through miles of tunnels filled with hollow ones, reach the core, plant the explosives, and attempt extraction. Every step carried a high probability of failure. The humans had accounted for this by bringing backup teams, backup explosives, and backup plans that went 17 layers deep. Zale Vorn studied the human soldiers during the journey. They spent their time in ways he found both strange and fascinating. Some played games with cards and dice, laughing at jokes he did not understand. Others wrote messages to people they loved, recording words they might never speak in person. A few sat in quiet meditation, preparing their minds for what lay ahead. None of them spoke about fear, though Zale Vorn could sense it in their biological responses. Their hearts beat faster than normal. Their hands occasionally trembled, yet they chose to face that fear rather than surrender to it. A young soldier named Private Thomas Chen, no relation to the general, approached Zale Vorn's station. He was barely into his 20s, with a face that still held the softness of youth. In human terms, he had barely begun to live. "Commander Zale Vorn, can I ask you something?" Zale Vorn turned his crystalline head toward the young human. "You may. What's it like, living so long, seeing so much?" The question caught Zale Vorn by surprise. Humans often asked about his powers or his experiences in battle. They rarely asked about the experience of existence itself. "It is." He paused, searching for words that could bridge the gap between their perspectives. "It is sometimes lonely. When you exist long enough, everything begins to repeat. Wars happen, end, and happen again. Civilizations rise and fall in patterns you learn to predict. After a certain point, the novelty fades. You begin to wonder why you continue at all." Thomas nodded slowly, absorbing this information. "That sounds terrible. I did not understand how terrible until I met your species," Zale Vorn admitted. "You live such brief lives. Every moment should be precious to you. Yet, you spend those moments fighting, working, struggling. I used to think this was evidence of your primitiveness. Now I wonder if it is evidence of something else entirely." "What do you mean?" Zale Vorn considered his answer carefully. "The Eternals stopped struggling long ago. We achieved near immortality, near invincibility, and we became complacent. We observe. We analyze. We rarely act unless forced. Your species is the opposite. You know you will die. And instead of accepting that fate, you rage against it. You build, create, and fight, as if every moment matters because to you, every moment does matter." Thomas smiled, an expression that Zale Vorn had come to associate with human warmth. "My grandfather used to say that humans are just too stubborn to accept limitations. He said we're the species that looked at fire and thought, I can use that instead of running away." The conversation was interrupted by the navigation alert. They were entering the moon's gravity well. From this point forward, there would be no turning back. The Hope's Edge engaged its stealth systems and began its descent toward the thermal vents. The landing was rough. The ship's hull groaned as they pushed through the moon's thin atmosphere of toxic gases. Martinez had the soldiers in their suits within minutes. Weapons checked. Equipment verified. And spirits seemingly unaffected by the reality of what they were about to attempt. "Listen up," Martinez addressed her team in the cargo hold. "I'm not going to lie to you. Most of us are probably not coming back from this. The Hollow Ones are going to throw everything they have at us, and we're a long way from backup. But I want every single one of you to remember why we're here. That device threatens every world in the galaxy. Our families, our friends, everyone we've ever loved is counting on us to get this job done. So we're going to get it done." Questions? There were no questions. Only a chorus of affirmations that rumbled through the cargo hold like thunder. Zyle Vorn added his own voice to the sound, feeling something stir in his ancient core that he had not felt in millennia. Purpose. The tunnel entrance was exactly where intelligence had predicted. Martinez led the first squad in, their lights cutting through darkness that seemed to absorb illumination itself. Zyle Vorn brought up the rear, his senses extended to detect any Hollow Ones that might approach from behind. They encountered the first resistance within an hour. A cluster of Hollow Ones emerged from a side passage, their formless bodies lunging toward the soldiers. The humans reacted with practiced precision. Squad 2 laid down suppressive fire while Squad 1 advanced, their enhanced ammunition tearing through the creatures with ruthless efficiency. Zyle Vorn contributed his own attacks, his reality-bending powers still weakened, but effective enough to shield the soldiers from attacks they could not dodge in time. The battle lasted 4 minutes. 3 humans were injured, 1 seriously. The medic, a woman named Dr. Sarah Kim, stabilized the wounded soldier with the same calm efficiency that the combat troops displayed in battle. When it was clear the soldier could not continue, Martinez faced a decision. "Kowalski, Chen, you're staying with Patterson. Get him back to the ship. Wait for extraction." Private Thomas Chen started to protest. "Sergeant, I should stay with the team. That's not a request, Private. Patterson needs protection. You're providing it." Zyle Vorn watched Thomas struggle with this order. The young soldier clearly wanted to continue with his comrades, to share their fate, whatever it might be. But Martinez had given him a purpose, a responsibility that demanded obedience. After a long moment, Thomas nodded. "Yes, Sergeant. Stay safe." Martinez smiled grimly. "Safe isn't on the agenda. Just get Patterson home." The team continued with 60 soldiers plus Zyle Vorn. The tunnels grew narrower as they descended, the concentration of Hollow Ones increasing with every kilometer. They fought through ambush after ambush, losing soldiers in 1s and 2s. Each loss was acknowledged with a brief moment of silence, a spoken name, and then the mission continued. There was no time for proper mourning. That would come later, if any of them survived. By the time they reached the approach to the core, the team had been reduced to 41. 22 soldiers had died in the tunnels, giving their lives to advance the mission by inches. Zyle Vorn's powers were nearly exhausted, his crystal form covered in cracks that would take decades to fully heal. Yet no one suggested retreat. No one even mentioned the possibility. The core chamber was a vast hollow space, filled with the stolen light of 100 consumed stars. At its center, the reality-tearing device pulsed with malevolent energy. It was nearly complete, perhaps days from activation. The sight of it made Zyle Vorn's ancient soul recoil. Even he, who had witnessed cosmic horrors beyond human imagination, found the device's wrongness disturbing on a fundamental level. Between them and the device stood an army. Thousands of Hollow Ones filled the chamber, their forms shifting and flowing in patterns that hurt the eyes to watch. At their center stood something larger, something that made the ordinary Hollow Ones look like children. This creature radiated power that Zyle Vorn recognized with cold dread. It was a Hollow Lord, one of the original beings that had emerged from the space between dimensions. Only a handful existed, and each one was capable of consuming entire worlds. "Well," Martinez said quietly, surveying the impossible odds before them. This got complicated. Lieutenant Jackson, her second in command, checked his ammunition. "We don't have enough firepower to get through that." "No," Martinez agreed. "We don't." Zale Vorn stepped forward. "I may be able to create an opening. My remaining power can distract the Hollow Lord, while your soldiers plant the explosives. But I cannot guarantee how long I can hold its attention." "How long will you last?" Martinez asked. "Against that creature? Minutes at best, perhaps less." The soldiers exchanged glances. They understood what Zale Vorn was offering. He was giving them time at the cost of his 12 billion-year existence. He was volunteering to die so that humans he had known for barely 2 years could complete their mission. Martinez shook her head. "No, we're not losing you. Sergeant, the mission takes priority. I am one soldier. The device threatens billions." I said no. Martinez's voice held an authority that surprised even Zale Vorn. "We came here as a team, and we're completing this mission as a team. Nobody gets left behind to die alone." Before Zale Vorn could argue, Martinez was already reorganizing her soldiers. She split them into 3 groups. The first would provide distraction, drawing as many Hollow Ones away from the core as possible. The second would engage the Hollow Lord directly, sacrificing themselves to keep it occupied. The third, the smallest group, would carry the explosives to the device. "Who leads the distraction team?" Zale Vorn asked. Martinez smiled, but there was no humor in it. "I do. You will die. Probably. But I'll buy time for the others. That's the job." Corporal Williams, a young soldier who had been quiet throughout the mission, spoke up. "I'll lead the Lord engagement team. Got nothing waiting for me back home anyway. Might as well go out fighting something legendary." One by one, soldiers volunteered for the groups that guaranteed death. There was no shortage of volunteers. If anything, there were too many. Humans actively competed for the opportunity to sacrifice themselves. Zale Vorn watched this display with something approaching awe. He had witnessed countless species face extinction. He had seen civilizations crumble and mighty empires fall. Never, in all his billions of years, had he seen anything like this. These creatures, so fragile, so temporary, were fighting over the chance to throw their lives away for a mission that might not even succeed. "I will join the Lord engagement team," Zale Vorn declared. Williams shook his head. "Commander, you should go with the explosives team. Your powers might be needed to actually arm the device. My powers are nearly depleted. I am more useful as a distraction than a technician. Then you're with me." Williams extended his hand in the human gesture of respect. "It's been an honor, Commander." Zale Vorn took the hand and felt the warmth of human flesh against his cold crystal. "The honor is mine, Corporal." The assault began with Martinez's distraction team charging directly into the mass of Hollow Ones. Their weapons blazed. Their voices rose in battle cries. And they drew thousands of creatures away from the core. Zale Vorn watched Martinez fight with the fury of someone who had nothing left to lose. She moved through the enemy like a force of nature, her every motion calculated to cause maximum destruction. Williams led his team toward the Hollow Lord. 10 humans and 1 Eternal against a being that had consumed worlds. The creature noticed their approach and turned its vast attention toward them. Reality itself seemed to warp around its presence. The first human died in seconds, pulled into the Lord's form and consumed before he could even scream. The second lasted slightly longer, managing to fire several rounds before being torn apart by tendrils of living darkness. Zale Vorn threw everything he had at the creature, his remaining power buying precious moments for the explosives team to advance. Williams fought beside him, emptying magazine after magazine into the Lord's form. The bullets did nothing. Less than nothing. But Williams kept firing anyway. When his ammunition ran out, he drew a combat knife and charged. "Williams, no." Zale Vorn reached for the human, but he was too slow. The Hollow Lord's tendril caught Williams around the waist. The corporal looked at Zale Vorn one last time, his face showing no fear, only determination. "Get that thing killed, Commander." Then he was gone, pulled into the darkness, and consumed. Zale Vorn felt something break inside him. Not his crystal form, which was already shattered beyond recognition. Something deeper. Something that had been dormant for billions of years. Rage flooded through him. Hot and bright and terrifyingly alive. He had watched countless beings die throughout his existence. He had observed tragedies that would break lesser minds. Never had he felt anything like this. This fury, this overwhelming need to avenge creatures he had known for such a brief time. The Hollow Lord turned its full attention to him, perhaps sensing that this broken Eternal was the last real threat. It advanced, its form expanding to engulf him entirely. Zale Vorn did something he had never done before. Something that went against every principle of eternal philosophy. He stopped calculating. He stopped analyzing. He stopped trying to survive. He attacked. His crystalline form blazed with light as he threw every remaining fragment of power into a single devastating strike. The explosion illuminated the entire chamber, temporarily blinding the Hollow Ones and creating the moment the explosives team needed. They reached the device and began their work. The Hollow Lord recoiled from Zalvorn's attack, wounded for perhaps the first time in its ancient existence. But the strike had cost Zalvorn everything. His form collapsed, his consciousness fading as his crystal body shattered into thousands of fragments. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was Martinez, still fighting, still refusing to fall, buying time for her team to complete their mission. Then there was nothing. Consciousness returned in fragments. At first, Zalvorn was aware only of voices, distant and muffled like sounds heard through deep water. Then came sensation. The strange feeling of existing in a body that was no longer whole. Finally, vision returned, and he found himself staring at an unfamiliar ceiling bathed in soft, artificial light. A human face appeared above him. Dr. Sarah Kim, the medic who had treated the wounded soldiers in the tunnels. "Commander, can you hear me?" Zale Vorn tried to speak but found his form unable to produce sound. His crystal body had been shattered beyond recognition. What remained of him was held together by human medical technology that should not have been capable of containing eternal energy. "Don't try to talk," Dr. Kim said gently. "Your vocal matrices are still reforming. You've been unconscious for 3 weeks. We didn't know if you would ever wake up." 3 weeks. In eternal terms, that was less than the blink of an eye. Yet somehow, it felt like an eternity. "You're on the command vessel," Dr. Kim continued. "We won. The explosives destroyed the device. The moon's orbit destabilized exactly as planned. The Hollow Ones lost their greatest weapon." Zale Vorn processed this information slowly. The mission had succeeded. But at what cost? His question must have shown in his expression because Dr. Kim's face softened with sadness. "We lost 47 soldiers, including most of the core assault team. Sergeant Martinez was among the last to fall. She held her position until the explosives team confirmed detonation. Then she didn't stop fighting. She never stopped fighting. They found her body surrounded by the remains of nearly 100 Hollow Ones. Martinez was gone. Williams was gone. So many of the humans Zale Vorn had come to respect were simply gone. Their brief lives had ended in fire and darkness, spent to save a galaxy that barely knew their names. How did I survive? Zale Vorn managed to transmit his thoughts directly into the doctor's neural interface. Private Thomas Chen. He disobeyed orders. Instead of waiting at the ship, he led the wounded back, picked up additional volunteers, and launched a rescue mission into the core chamber. They found your scattered fragments and collected every piece they could find. It took 16 hours to gather enough of you to attempt reconstruction. Thomas, the young soldier who had asked what it was like to live forever. He had risked everything to save the shattered remains of an alien he barely knew. "The council wanted to leave you, Doctor," Kim admitted. "They said Eternals couldn't be saved once their forms were shattered. That it was impossible." Thomas told them that humans didn't believe in impossible. He said if there was even a fraction of a chance that you could be saved, we had an obligation to try. Zale Vorn's fragmented consciousness struggled to process this. Humans had gone back into that nightmare chamber, risking their own lives, to save broken pieces of crystal that might never reform into a living being. They had done it not because of orders, or because he was valuable to the war effort. They had done it because he was one of them. "We don't leave our people behind." Dr. Kim echoed the words Martinez had spoken what felt like a lifetime ago. "You fought with us. That makes you family." Over the following months, Ziel Vorn slowly reformed. Human scientists worked alongside Eternal technicians to develop new reconstruction techniques. Things that should have been impossible became possible through sheer determination and creative thinking. The humans refused to accept failure as an option, and somehow, the universe bent to accommodate their stubbornness. General Chen visited regularly, bringing reports of the war's progress. The destruction of the reality device had been a turning point. Without their ultimate weapon, the Hollow Ones were being pushed back on every front. Species that had been on the verge of extinction were mounting counterattacks. For the first time in 3 centuries, victory seemed possible. "We're getting requests from every species in the Alliance," Chen told Ziel Vorn during one visit. "They all want human soldiers embedded in their units. Command doesn't know how to handle it." "What changed?" Ziel Vorn asked. His voice had returned, though it sounded different than before. Softer and somehow more expressive. "You did." Chen smiled slightly. Word spread about what happened on that moon. About an Eternal commander who volunteered for a suicide mission because humans inspired him to care. About soldiers who went back into impossible odds to save alien remains. The other species are starting to realize that fighting alongside humans changes things. "It does," Ziel Vorn agreed. "I have existed for 12 billion years. I have witnessed more than most beings in the universe could comprehend. Nothing I experienced before prepared me for the 2 years I spent fighting beside your soldiers." "What was so different?" Ziel Vorn considered the question carefully. He had been thinking about it constantly during his long recovery, trying to understand what made humans so different from every other species he had encountered. "The Eternals believe that existence should be preserved at all costs," he finally said. "We fear death because we have so much to lose. The Crothians value strength because they believe the strong deserve to survive. The Mindweavers seek knowledge because they believe understanding the universe gives life meaning. Every species I have known defines their existence by what they wish to keep." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Humans are different. You define yourselves by what you are willing to give up. Your soldiers volunteer for suicide missions not because they want to die, but because they are willing to die for something greater than themselves. You fight not to preserve your own lives, but to protect the lives of others. This is why you are so difficult to defeat. This is why even gods tremble when facing you." Chen was quiet for a long moment. "That's quite a compliment, Commander." "It is not a compliment. It is an observation of fact. I have seen species that could destroy stars with a thought. I have witnessed civilizations that bent reality itself to their will. None of them frightened me the way a single human soldier with a standard rifle frightens me. Because the Star Destroyers fight to survive. The reality benders fight to maintain their power. But humans fight for things they will never see, for people they will never meet, for futures they will never experience. There is no defense against that kind of devotion." The war ended 14 months later. The final battle took place above the Hollow Ones' home dimension, a tier in reality that served as their gateway to the universe. A combined fleet from every species in the Alliance gathered to seal the rift permanently. Humans led the assault. Ziel Vorn had fully recovered by then, his crystal form reformed and in some ways stronger than before. The reconstruction process had incorporated elements of human design, creating something new. He was still an Eternal, but he was also something more, something touched by humanity's essence. He requested and received permission to join the human contingent for the final battle. The Galactic Council no longer questioned such requests. They had learned that when an Eternal wanted to fight beside humans, it was best to allow it. The battle was brutal. The Hollow Ones knew they were facing extinction and fought with desperate fury. Thousands of ships were destroyed in the first hour alone. The rift pulsed with malevolent energy, spawning endless waves of creatures that seemed to have no limit. But the humans did not stop. They pressed forward through losses that would have broken any other species. When one ship fell, another took its place. When one soldier died, another stepped forward to continue the fight. They were not the strongest warriors on the battlefield. They were not the most powerful, but they were the most relentless. Private Thomas Chen, now promoted to lieutenant, commanded a destroyer in the human fleet. Ziel Vorn served aboard his ship, a deliberate choice that the young officer had accepted with obvious emotion. "It's good to have you back, Commander," Thomas said as they prepared for the assault. "When we found your pieces in that chamber, I wasn't sure we'd ever talk again." "You saved my existence," Ziel Vorn replied. "I will spend the rest of my days trying to understand why." Thomas shrugged, a casual gesture that Ziel Vorn had learned to interpret as human humility. "You were one of us. That's all the reason we needed." The final push to seal the rift cost the Alliance dearly. Entire fleets were consumed by the Dimensional Tier's unstable energies. Ziel Vorn watched Crothian dreadnoughts and Stellari cruisers dissolve into nothingness alongside human vessels. The death toll reached into the millions, yet the humans never wavered. When their ships were destroyed, they launched escape pods and continued fighting with personal weapons. When their weapons failed, they flew suicide runs directly into enemy formations. One human pilot, her vessel crippled and burning, navigated her ship into the rift's control nexus and detonated her reactor, creating the opening the fleet needed to begin the sealing sequence. Her name was Emily Rodriguez. She was 23 years old. Her last transmission was recorded and later played at her memorial service. "Tell my family I love them. Tell them I did my job." The rift was sealed at tremendous cost. The Hollow Ones were not destroyed, but they were cut off from the universe, trapped in their own dimension with no way to return. The war that had threatened all existence was finally over. The celebration that followed was the largest in galactic history. Every species participated, from the ancient Eternals to the youngest races that had only discovered interstellar travel during the war. Leaders gathered to commemorate the victory and honor those who had fallen. Ziel Vorn was asked to speak at the ceremony. He stood before an audience of trillions, beings from across the galaxy, watching through every form of broadcast technology, and spoke words that would be remembered for millennia. "I have lived for 12 billion years. I have seen the birth and death of countless stars. I have witnessed civilizations rise to heights of glory and fall to dust. I thought I understood the universe. I thought I knew what power meant, what strength meant, what courage meant. I was wrong." He paused, gathering himself for what came next. 3 years ago, I was assigned to fight alongside human soldiers. I looked at them and saw only weakness. Short lives, fragile bodies, limited abilities. I wondered what they could possibly contribute to a war fought by beings of cosmic power. I learned that I was asking the wrong question. The question was never what humans could contribute to us. The question was what they could teach us. The audience was silent, every being focused on his words. "Humans taught me that strength is not measured in the forces you can command, but in the sacrifices you are willing to make. They taught me that true power comes not from the ability to destroy, but from the willingness to give everything you have for others. They taught me that a species with short lives can accomplish more in those brief years than immortals accomplish in eternities, because they understand that every moment matters." Ziel Vorn's crystal form seemed to glow with internal light as he continued. "I watched human soldiers volunteer for missions they knew would kill them. I saw medics carry wounded aliens through hostile territory. I witnessed engineers work until they collapsed to save lives they had never met. I stood beside warriors who faced a hollow lord with nothing but simple weapons and unlimited courage. These are the beings who led us to victory. These are the beings who showed us what it truly means to fight." On Reselv, he looked directly into the broadcast sensors, knowing that trillions were watching. "The ancient texts of my people speak of beings so powerful that even gods tremble before them. For billions of years, we believed this was a myth. Now I know the truth. Those beings exist. They walk among us, they call themselves humans, and I am honored beyond measure to have fought beside them." The ceremony ended with a moment of silence for the fallen. Names were read, millions of them, each one representing a life given in service to the greater good. Human names dominated the list. They had died in greater numbers than any other species, not because they were weak, but because they had refused to hold back. In the years that followed, the galaxy changed. Human influence spread across 100 star systems, not through conquest, but through the simple act of being who they were. Species that had never considered cooperation began forming alliances. Ancient enemies found common ground. The Galactic Council was reformed to include more voices, more perspectives, more of the diversity that humans had shown could be a strength rather than a weakness. Zale Vorn remained with the human fleet. He could have returned to his own people, taken his place among the eternal elders, and spent millennia in contemplation of his experiences. Instead, he chose to continue serving alongside the beings who had changed him. He trained human soldiers, advised human commanders, and shared 12 billion years of wisdom with a species that had existed for barely a cosmic moment. Thomas Chen eventually rose to the rank of admiral. He commanded the largest human fleet in history, a force that patrolled the boundaries of known space and protected the peace that had been purchased with so much blood. He and Zale Vorn remained close, their friendship becoming legendary throughout the galaxy. On the 10th anniversary of the war's end, Thomas asked Zale Vorn the question that had been burning in his mind since they first met. Do you ever regret it? Volunteering for that mission? Shattering yourself to save us? Zale Vorn considered his answer carefully, as he always did. But the truth came easily. I existed for 12 billion years before I met humans. I experienced everything the universe had to offer, or so I believed. None of it compared to the 2 years I spent fighting beside your soldiers. None of it gave my existence meaning the way those experiences did. If I could go back and make the choice again, I would shatter myself 1,000 times to stand with you. Thomas smiled, the same warm expression that Zale Vorn had first seen in a young private asking questions about immortality. That's good to hear, Commander. Because the universe isn't done needing saving. There are new threats out there, new challenges we haven't even imagined yet, and humanity will face them as you always have. Not alone, Thomas replied. We've got friends now. Allies who understand what we're about. Eternals who've learned what we can teach. Zale Vorn nodded, his crystal form catching the light of a nearby star. Indeed. You do, Admiral. Indeed you do. The story of Commander Zale Vorn and the human soldiers who changed him spread across the galaxy, passed down through generations as a testament to what could be achieved when beings chose to fight for something greater than themselves. It became required study at military academies on 1,000 worlds. Young soldiers of every species learned about the frail creatures from Earth who refused to accept limitations, and the ancient being who discovered that 12 billion years of existence meant nothing compared to a single moment of true purpose. And whenever beings gathered to discuss power, strength, and courage, someone would inevitably speak of the humans. They would tell stories of soldiers who volunteered for suicide missions without hesitation. They would describe medics who carried the wounded through impossible odds. They would remember pilots who flew their burning ships into enemy formations rather than retreat. Most importantly, they would remember the words of an eternal commander who had witnessed the rise and fall of galaxies. Fighting beside humans taught me why even gods tremble, because in the end, it was not the power to destroy that made beings truly formidable. It was the willingness to give everything for others. It was the refusal to accept defeat. It was the ability to find hope in the darkest moments and fight for it with everything they had. These were the gifts humanity brought to the stars. These were the lessons they taught the universe. And these were the reasons why. Long after the war ended, beings across the galaxy looked to the small blue planet called Earth and felt not pity for its fragile inhabitants, but something far more appropriate. They felt awe.